This story is titled, My Parents Hid the Secret That My Sister Cheated on Me with My Husband, but at her baby shower, the gift I gave ignited an overwhelming wave of violence against them. Hey, I don't even know where to begin with this, so I'll just start at the beginning. My name's Alina, 30 female. I grew up in Chicago with my older sister Julia, 32 female, and my parents. And honestly, I've always felt like I was just the extra kid. Julia was the one everyone doted on. She was the pretty one, the smart one, the golden child. Me? I was just there, the responsible one, the one they could count on to figure it out or not make a fuss. That's their way of saying I didn't matter as much. It wasn't like they were evil or anything. They just made it really clear, in 100 little ways, that Julia came first. Like, in middle school, I worked my butt off to win the regional spelling bee. I was so excited when I came home with the trophy. I thought they'd be proud. But my dad barely looked up from the newspaper, and my mom said, "That's nice, sweetie, but did you hear Julia got asked to the spring dance? Isn't that so exciting?" High school was worse. I made the varsity swim team, which was a big deal because I was just a freshman. But Julia was a senior and got a lead in the school play. Guess which one they showed up for? It wasn't the swim meets. I remember sitting in the car after a big competition, holding my first place medal, and my dad asking if I could give Julia a ride to her play rehearsal. I wanted to throw the medal at him, but I just said sure. Even now, as adults, it hasn't stopped. A few years ago, when Julia bought her first house, my parents helped with the down payment. They even paid her closing costs. When I mentioned needing help with car repairs, my mom said, "Oh, sweetie, maybe you should budget better." Like, okay, I'll just budget better next time my transmission goes out. Cool. Anyway, the point is, Julia's always been the favorite. I never hated her for it, though. I figured that's just how families are sometimes, you know? I thought she cared about me, that we were close despite all the weird favoritism. But last week, I found out how wrong I was. It started when I went to my parents' house to drop off some paperwork my mom had asked for. Nothing dramatic, just insurance stuff she needed me to fill out because apparently, I'm the only one who knows how to handle paperwork. When I walked in, they were sitting in the living room. My mom was on the phone, and I could hear her on speaker. I wasn't paying much attention until I heard Julia's voice. She said, "Mom, Alina can't find out about me and Jay. Jay, my husband." I froze. My mom said something like, "Don't worry, sweetie, she won't. It's better this way. You've got so much on the line." My dad chimed in with, "Yeah, let's not ruin your life over one mistake." My heart felt like it stopped. My own sister, my husband, and my parents knew? I felt like I'd been sucker punched. I quietly backed out of the house and left. I didn't even grab the paperwork. I just got in my car and drove home, trying to wrap my head around what I'd just heard. When I got home, Jay was there, sitting on the couch like everything was fine. I couldn't even look at him. I went straight to the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to barge into the living room and scream at him. Another part of me wanted to drive straight to Julia's house and confront her. But mostly, I just felt numb. For the next few days, I kept to myself. Jay kept asking me if something was wrong, but I couldn't talk to him. Every time I opened my mouth, I felt like I was going to cry or throw up. I couldn't even text Julia. I knew if I tried, I'd lose it completely. The thing is, this isn't just about the cheating. It's about the betrayal from all sides. My sister, who I thought I could trust. My parents, who I thought were supposed to love me. They all knew, and none of them cared enough to tell me. They cared more about protecting Julia's perfect image than protecting me. I spent a lot of time just sitting in my car, driving around aimlessly, trying to figure out what to do. I didn't want to confront them without proof. What if they denied it? What if they made me feel like I was crazy? So, I decided to wait. I didn't know what I was waiting for exactly, but I knew I needed to keep my cool until I had a plan. Then, a few days later, my mom called me, all cheerful, like nothing was wrong. "Alina, honey, can you help plan Julia's baby shower?" she asked, like she wasn't actively covering for Julia sleeping with my husband. "Oh yeah. Did I mention Julia's pregnant? And now I don't even know if the baby's her husband Nate's or if it's Jay's." The audacity of her asking me to plan this party was almost laughable, but instead of blowing up at her, I said, "Sure, Mom, I'd love to help." After that call with my mom, I was done feeling sorry for myself. It wasn't just about Julia sleeping with Jay anymore. It was about all of them thinking they could get away with it. My parents, my sister, my husband, they were treating me like I was some kind of clueless idiot who'd just smile and go along with everything. That pissed me off more than anything. But I knew I couldn't just blow up and start yelling. No one would take me seriously, and they'd probably twist it around to make me look like the bad guy. Julia's always been good at playing the victim, and I wasn't going to give her that chance. If I wanted to confront them, I needed proof, not just vague suspicions or overheard conversations. I needed hard evidence they couldn't deny. So that night, after Jay fell asleep, I grabbed his phone. Normally, I'd feel weird about going through someone's stuff, but honestly, after what I'd overheard, I didn't feel guilty at all. I didn't even know what I was looking for at first, but it didn't take long to find something. Jay wasn't exactly a mastermind when it came to hiding things. He had a folder on his phone labeled Receipts. Real subtle, right? And when I opened it, there they were. Photos of him and Julia. Some were just selfies, but others were, well, let's just say there was no mistaking what was going on. One picture was of the two of them at a hotel. Julia was in a bathrobe, and Jay was grinning like a damn fool. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just stared at the pictures, saving them to my own phone one by one. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from pure anger. How could they be so careless? So confident that I'd never find out. After the photos, I went through his messages. There was a long thread between him and Julia, full of inside jokes, I miss you texts, and plans to meet up. One text stood out to me. Julia had sent him a picture of a baby onesie with the caption, "Do you think Nate will like this?" That hit me like a ton of bricks. They weren't just having an affair, they were laughing about it, mocking Nate, lying to him, and playing happy families while this whole mess unfolded. I saved the messages and moved on to his email. At first, I thought there wouldn't be anything there. Who emails about affairs, right? But then I found a confirmation email for a hotel booking from a few months ago. The name on the reservation was his, but there was a note about special arrangements for 2 guests. The date lined up perfectly with one of the texts Julia had sent him about getting away for a weekend. I took screenshots of everything. Every picture, every message, every email. I even forwarded some of the emails to myself just in case Jay ever tried to delete them. I wasn't going to let them wiggle out of this. Over the next few nights, I kept digging. I went through Jay's laptop, his social media accounts, and even his old backups. At one point, I found a folder of old photos that he probably forgot even existed. There was one picture of him and Julia from a family barbecue a couple of years ago. They were standing a little too close, and Julia had her hand on his arm. Looking back now, it felt like a giant neon sign that I had been too blind to see. But it wasn't just about Jay. I started paying attention to Julia's social media too. She's one of those people who posts everything online. Brunches, shopping trips, yoga sessions, you name it. At first glance, it all seemed harmless. But when I looked closer, I noticed little things. A photo of her at a cafe with 2 cups of coffee on the table, but no one else in the frame. A picture of her at a hotel lobby with the caption, "Weekend Escape," but no tag for Nate or any of her friends. It all started to add up. They weren't even being careful. They thought I was too stupid to notice, too blind to connect the dots. That was their biggest mistake. By the end of the week, I had more evidence than I knew what to do with. Photos, messages, emails, social media posts. It was like a giant puzzle that painted a picture of their betrayal. But I wasn't done yet. I decided to check Julia's husband Nate's social media too. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but I figured it couldn't hurt. Nate didn't post much, but his recent photos showed a man who looked tired, like something was eating away at him. In one post, he'd written, "Life's full of surprises. Not all of them good." At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. But now I wondered if he knew something was up. I considered reaching out to Nate, but I wasn't sure if that was the right move. What if he didn't believe me? What if he was in on it somehow? The last thing I wanted was to give Julia a heads up before I had my plan fully in place. The final piece of the puzzle came when I stumbled onto a shared family folder my parents kept online. It was mostly full of old photos and documents, but there was one folder marked baby shower plans. I opened it out of curiosity, and there it was. A draft guest list for Julia's shower. My name was listed as the event coordinator. I almost laughed. They wanted me to coordinate the shower for the woman who was sleeping with my husband? The sheer audacity of it was unreal. But that's when it hit me. The shower wasn't just a party, it was the perfect stage. Everyone would be there. Julia, Jay, my parents, Nate, their friends and family. I closed the folder and sat back, my mind racing. The baby shower wasn't going to be a celebration. It was going to be a reckoning. Everything then started falling into place. I mean, how could I resist? My mom was practically handing me the opportunity on a silver platter, acting like nothing was wrong. The plan wasn't just about exposing Julia and Jay. It was about making everyone see what they'd done. The lies, the betrayal, the absolute sham of their perfect lives. And I wasn't going to hold back. The first step was making sure everything looked normal. I agreed to take charge of the shower, like the good little sister they all expected me to be. My mom was thrilled. texting me nonstop with ideas for decorations, themes, and catering. She even sent me links to Pinterest boards, which honestly was hilarious considering the chaos I was about to unleash. I acted like the perfect team player, messaging Julia and asking her what colors she wanted for the decorations. She replied with pink and gold, for something classy, like she had a clue what class even meant. I didn't let on for a second that I knew about her and Jay. I kept my replies short and sweet, pretending I was too busy to chat much. If she suspected anything, she didn't show it. Once the basics were handled, I started working on the real plan. I had all the evidence saved on my phone, but I needed a way to present it that would leave no room for doubt. At first, I thought about just printing everything out and handing it to people, but that felt too small. I wanted this to be big, undeniable, and impossible for them to ignore. That's when I remembered the projector at the event venue. The shower was being held at this fancy community hall my parents had rented. It came with all the bells and whistles, including a giant screen and a projector system. Perfect. I spent hours putting together a PowerPoint presentation. It was the most effort I'd ever put into something for Julia, and it wasn't even for her benefit. The first few slides were harmless, generic congratulatory messages, and cute baby-themed graphics. But then it shifted. The next slides featured screenshots of Julia and Jay's texts, complete with timestamps. Then came the photos. I chose the most damning ones. I ended the presentation with a short video clip of them in a hotel room. It wasn't explicit or anything, but it didn't need to be. Julia's giggling, "Nate will never find out," was enough. When the presentation was done, I saved it to a USB drive and triple-checked it to make sure it worked. I also backed it up on my phone and emailed it to myself just in case. I wasn't taking any chances. With the evidence ready, I turned my attention back to the party. I needed to make sure everything looked perfect, so no one suspected a thing. I ordered fancy decorations, set up a catering menu, and even designed personalized party favors with Julia's name on them. My mom kept gushing about how proud she was of me for coming together for my sister. Every time she said something like that, I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. The week leading up to the shower was surreal. Jay was acting like nothing was wrong, probably assuming I hadn't noticed anything. Julia was her usual bubbly self, texting me every day with questions about the party. My parents were full of their usual over-the-top excitement, constantly talking about how wonderful it was that Julia was going to be a mom. I played along, smiling and nodding, even though every word they said felt like a slap in the face. But I didn't let it show. If they thought I was oblivious, all the better. The morning of the shower, I arrived at the venue early to set up. Guests started arriving, including Julia and Nate. She looked radiant, like someone who thought she had the world wrapped around her finger. Nate looked tired, but he was trying to keep up appearances. Then there was Jay. He showed up late, of course, and gave me this sheepish smile like he was expecting me to be mad about him not helping. I just waved him off, pretending like I didn't care. If he only knew. My cousin Clara showed up with her phone out, already live streaming for her Instagram followers. She's one of those people who documents everything, and normally it's annoying, but today, it was a blessing. Clara's live stream meant the entire world would see what was about to happen, not just the people in the room. As the party got underway, I made sure everything was running smoothly. People were laughing, eating, and complimenting Julia on how great she looked. My parents were buzzing around, practically glowing with pride. When it was time for speeches, my mom went first, saying how proud she was of Julia and how excited she was to be a grandmother. Julia teared up, of course, because she loves being the center of attention. Then it was my turn. I grabbed the microphone, took a deep breath, and smiled. "Julia," I said, "you've always been the star of the family. Today, I wanted to give you something truly unforgettable." I walked over to the projector, plugged in the USB drive, and hit play. At first, everything seemed fine. The first slide was a picture of Julia and Nate from one of their trips. Something sweet and harmless to set the mood. People were smiling, nodding, and a few even clapped, thinking it was going to be one of those cheesy, sentimental presentations. Julia looked at me like I was the best sister ever, giving me that fake, grateful smile she's mastered over the year. And then, slide 2 hit. The room went quiet, and I mean dead silent. The slide showed a screenshot of one of Julia and Jay's text conversations. It wasn't anything too explicit, just flirty messages about missing each other and can't wait to see you again. But it was enough to make people shift uncomfortably in their seats. Julia's smile froze, and she glanced at me, confused. Jay, on the other hand, looked like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't pause. I let the next slide roll. A series of photos of Julia and Jay at a hotel. One was just the two of them standing in the lobby, but the next one showed Julia in a bathrobe sitting on the edge of a bed, smiling at Jay, who was standing behind her with his shirt off. That's when the whispers started. "What is this? Someone near the front muttered, "Is that Jay? That's not Nate, right?" Julia's face went from confused to panicked. She stood up, half reaching for the projector, but it was too late. The next slide hit, a short text exchange where Julia joked about how clueless Nate was, and how easy it was to keep the secret. "Alina!" Julia's voice cut through the murmurs. "What the hell is this?" I ignored her. I didn't even look at her. The presentation rolled on. The next slide was another level shock. It was the video. Just a short clip of Julia and Jay sitting on a hotel bed. That's when the room exploded. Nate shot up from his chair, his face a mix of shock and anger. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the hall. Julia froze. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Jay, sitting a few seats away, looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. "Is this real?" someone in the back asked. "What the hell is going on?" Clara's live stream was still rolling, capturing every second of the chaos. Her phone was blowing up with comments like, "OMG, this is wild!" and "Someone stop the presentation!" People at the party started pulling out their phones, filming and texting others. Julia finally found her voice. "Alina, stop this! What's wrong with you?" she yelled, her face red and her voice cracking. I stood there, calm as ever. I grabbed the microphone and said, "What's wrong with me?" "Julia, maybe you should be asking yourself that question. Sleeping with my husband? Really? And you thought I wouldn't find out?" Gasps rippled through the room. "Wait," Nate said, holding up his hand. "What did you just say? You slept with Jay?" He was looking at Julia now, his expression shifting from confused to furious. "It's not what it looks like," Julia stammered, tears streaming down her face. "I can explain." "Explain what?" Nate snapped. "That you've been screwing her husband? That's a hell of an explanation, Julia." Jay tried to stand up, raising his hands as if to calm everyone down. Let's just talk about this," he said, his voice shaking. I couldn't help but laugh at that. "Oh, now you want to talk? You didn't seem too interested in talking when you were sneaking around behind my back." Julia turned to me, her voice desperate. "Alina, please, we're family. You didn't have to do this in front of everyone." "Family?" I said, glaring at her. "You're seriously talking about family right now? Where was that family loyalty when you were hooking up with my husband? Don't even try to guilt me, Julia. You made your bed. Now lie in it." My parents, who had been eerily quiet until now, finally decided to jump in. My mom stood up, looking at me with this horrified expression. "Alina, enough! You've made your point. This isn't the place for this." "Oh, it's exactly the place for this," I shot back. "You've been covering for her this whole time, haven't you? Don't think I don't know. You knew about Julia and Jay, and instead of telling me, you helped her keep it a secret. Some mother you are." My dad tried to step in, but Nate cut him off. "You knew," he said, pointing at my parents. "You knew Julia was cheating on me and you didn't say anything?" "It's not like that," my mom said, looking flustered. "We were trying to protect..." "Protect who?" I interrupted. "Julia, because it sure as hell wasn't me." The room was chaos now. Guests were whispering, phones were buzzing, and my parents were trying to calm Nate down, while Julia just stood there crying. Jay, meanwhile, had quietly slipped toward the back of the room, clearly trying to escape. "Where do you think you're going?" I called out to him. Everyone turned to look as Jay froze, halfway to the door. "Alina, he started, but I didn't let him finish. "You don't get to walk away from this," I said. "You don't get to pretend like you didn't blow up our marriage. You and Julia deserve each other. I'm done with both of you." With that, I handed the microphone to one of the stunned party organizers and walked out. I didn't look back, but I could hear the chaos continuing behind me. As I got to my car, Clara caught up with me, her phone still in her hand. "Holy crap, Alina," she said out of breath. I don't even know what to say. People online are freaking out. The live stream is going viral." "Good," I said, slamming my car door shut. "Let the whole world know what they did." And with that, I drove away, leaving the mess behind me. I spent the next few days ignoring my phone. My mom and dad kept calling, but I didn't bother answering. Jay tried texting me too. Pathetic stuff like, "Can we talk?" and "You're being unreasonable." Yeah, I'm the unreasonable one. Sure, buddy. I didn't even bother blocking him because honestly, his desperation made me laugh. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from Mia, one of Julia's closest friends. Mia and I were never super close, but we'd hung out a few times at family events because Julia insisted on dragging her everywhere. She sent me a text that said, "Hey, can we talk? It's about Julia. I saw what happened at the shower." At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to deal with more drama, but eventually I texted back, "What's up?" Within minutes, she called me, and her voice was shaky. "I don't even know how to say this," Mia started. "But after the shower, I can't stop thinking about some stuff. I think Julia might have been messing around with my husband, Dan." Now, I didn't know Dan very well. He was one of those guys who always looked a little too slick, always dressed a little too perfectly, and always had a smirk that made me side-eye him. But the idea of Julia hooking up with her best friend's husband? At this point, it didn't even surprise me. "What makes you think that?" I asked, trying to sound calm even though I was already convinced Julia was guilty. Mia hesitated. "There have been a lot of little things, like Dan started acting weird around Julia a few months ago. He'd get really defensive if I asked about her, and one time I caught him smiling at his phone while texting her. When I asked who it was, he said it was work stuff. But then I saw the contact name and it just said Jay. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after seeing your presentation at the shower," her voice trailed off. "Mia, you need to check his phone," I said firmly. "If Julia was hooking up with Jay, there's no way she wouldn't go after someone else's husband too. She's trash. I hate to say it, but you probably already know the truth." Mia sighed. "Okay, I'll do it tonight." The next morning, I woke up to about 20 missed calls and texts from Mia. The first one just said, "Call me ASAP." Another said, "I can't believe this." And one simply read, "It's true." I called her back, and as soon as she answered, she burst into tears. "I found everything," she sobbed. "Texts, photos, emails, everything. Julia and Dan have been sleeping together for months. And it gets worse, Alina. He might be the father of her baby." I didn't even know what to say at first. It was so on brand for Julia that I wasn't shocked, but hearing it confirmed still made me furious. "Mia, I'm so sorry," I said finally. "What are you going to do?" "I kicked him out last night," she said through tears. "I couldn't even look at him. He tried to deny it at first, but when I showed him the texts, he just shut up. I told him I wanted a divorce, and he didn't even fight me on it." "Good for you," I said. "You deserve better than that scumbag. And Julia? She's disgusting. I don't even have words for how low she is." Mia sniffled. I can't believe she'd do this to me. I thought she was my friend." "Yeah, I thought she was my sister," I replied bitterly. "Turns out she's just a selfish, cheating mess who doesn't care who she hurts." Mia told me more about what she found. One text stood out. Julia sent Dan a picture of a baby onesie and wrote, "Can't wait to see if it looks like you or Nate." The sheer audacity of it made my blood boil. She wasn't just cheating, she was flaunting it. After Mia dropped the biggest news about Julia's baby potentially being Dan's, it felt like the universe was working overtime to unravel Julia's entire life. And honestly, I wasn't mad about it. For years, she walked around acting like she was untouchable, like nothing she did had consequences. Well, now the consequences were coming, and they weren't pulling any punches. The fallout started with Nate. He didn't waste any time after the baby shower. He kicked her out that same night. Julia tried calling him, probably to spin her usual web of excuses and lies. But Nate wasn't having it. He blocked her number, filed for divorce, and even announced it on social media with a simple post. Starting fresh. Short, but brutal. And the best part? Nate's friends and family rallied behind him. Julia had always been good at charming people, but this time, she'd gone too far. The evidence from the baby shower was too damning, and everyone had seen it. Clips of the presentation were circulating online. Strangers were tearing Julia apart in the comments, calling her everything from a homewrecker to a psychopath. Jay, on the other hand, was trying to keep a low profile. After I kicked him out, he went straight to my parents' house, where Julia was also staying. The irony wasn't lost on me. My cheating husband and my cheating sister, holed up together like two rats in a sinking ship. My parents, of course, welcomed them with open arms because, God forbid, Julia ever faces the consequences of her actions. But even Jay couldn't stick it out for long. A week later, I heard through a mutual friend that he and Julia were fighting. Apparently, Jay had found out about Dan. I don't know how exactly. Maybe Mia's divorce paperwork mentioned it, or maybe Julia let it slip during one of her crocodile tear breakdowns. Either way, Jay wasn't happy. According to the friend, Jay confronted Julia about Dan, and she tried to brush it off, saying it was just a fling and didn't mean anything. Jay, being the hypocrite that he is, got all self-righteous about being cheated on. He packed his bags and left, leaving Julia crying on my parents' couch. When I heard about this, I laughed for a good 5 minutes. The audacity of Jay, a man who cheated on me for months, being mad that Julia cheated on him? It was almost too good to be true. The best part was that Julia had nowhere else to go. Nate didn't want her. Jay was done with her. And even Dan hadn't reached out to Julia since Mia served him with divorce papers. And according to Mia, he was barely even acknowledging the baby. Mia told me Julia had tried calling Dan multiple times, leaving desperate voicemails about how they needed to talk about their future. But he wasn't biting. I couldn't help but laugh. Julia had spent her whole life acting like everyone wanted to orbit around her. But now, she was completely alone. My parents tried to keep up appearances, pretending everything was fine. But even they couldn't ignore the mess. People in their social circle started talking, and the whispers weren't flattering. My mom called me one afternoon, probably hoping to smooth things over and convince me to come back into the fold. "Alina, sweetie," she started, using her best guilt trip voice. "I know things have been difficult lately, but we're still a family. We need to work through this together." I almost choked on my coffee. "You mean the same family that covered for Julia while she destroyed my marriage?" "Yeah, no thanks." "Alina, that's not fair," she said, her voice tightening. "We were just trying to keep the peace." "Peace?" I snapped. "That's not peace. That's enabling. And now you want me to just forget about it?" "Not happening." She tried a few more lines, but I wasn't budging. By the end of the call, it was clear that she and my dad were more concerned about saving face than actually fixing anything. I told her as much before hanging up. Julia, on the other hand, was spiraling. I didn't hear this directly. She wouldn't dare talk to me, but mutual friends started reaching out to spill the tea. Apparently, Julia wasn't handling the public backlash well. She tried deleting her social media accounts, but by then, screenshots of her and Jay's texts had been plastered everywhere. Strangers were tagging her in posts, dragging her name through the mud. Even her so-called friends were distancing themselves. One of her closest friends, Natalie, told me she hadn't spoken to Julia since the baby shower. "I can't believe she would do that to you," Natalie said. "And to Mia. Like, what kind of person does that?" I didn't have an answer. Julia wasn't just selfish. She was reckless. She never thought about how her actions would affect other people. And now, for the first time, she was paying the price. The cherry on top came when Julia gave birth a few weeks later. I didn't go to the hospital, obviously, but I heard through the grapevine that Nate insisted on a paternity test before signing anything. And it's easy to guess. The baby wasn't Nate's, it was Dan's. When Mia told me, I nearly fell off my chair. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. "Nope," Mia replied. "Nate called me himself. He said the test was clear as day. It's Dan's kid. He told Julia he's done with her for good." I could only imagine the look on Julia's face when she got the results. She'd already lost Nate, Jay, and Dan. Now she was stuck raising a baby on her own, with no one left to blame but herself. As for me, I was finally feeling free. My divorce from Jay was finalized a few weeks after the baby shower. It was, in a word, liberating. It wasn't easy, divorces never are, but compared to the emotional weight of the betrayal, the legal part was surprisingly straightforward. Jay didn't even try to fight me on it, which was probably the smartest thing he'd done in years. Maybe he felt guilty, or maybe he just wanted to move on as quickly as possible. Either way, I wasn't about to complain. I'd contacted a lawyer the morning after the baby shower. I didn't want to waste time wallowing or letting Jay think there was any chance of reconciliation. The lawyer was amazing, straight to the point, empathetic, and clearly someone who had seen plenty of cases like mine. "You're doing the right thing," she said, after I finished explaining the situation. "People like Jay don't change, and you deserve better." We went through all the necessary steps, and thankfully, there wasn't much to fight over. Jay and I didn't have kids, which made things simpler, and we'd only bought the house together a few years ago. It wasn't fully paid off, so we agreed to sell it and split the proceeds. He tried to bring up some small stuff, like the furniture or the TV, but I didn't care. He could take whatever he wanted as long as he was out of my life. The hardest part wasn't the legal process. It was the emotional toll. Signing those papers felt like both an ending and a beginning. On one hand, it was heartbreaking to see my marriage, something I thought would last forever, reduced to a pile of documents and signatures. On the other hand, it was the final step in reclaiming my life. For too long, I'd let Jay's lies and Julia's manipulation define my reality. This was my chance to start over. The day the divorce was finalized, I threw out everything that reminded me of Jay. Old photos, his clothes, even the stupid mug he always used for coffee. It all went in the trash. It wasn't about being petty. Okay, maybe a little. It was about cleansing my space of the negativity he brought into my life. I didn't want any reminders of the man who betrayed me, the man who chose my sister over me. What surprised me the most was how quickly I felt a sense of relief. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of Jay's lies on my shoulders. My apartment was small and modest, but it was mine, and it felt more like home than the house I'd shared with him ever did. Jay tried reaching out a couple of times after the divorce was finalized. His texts were pathetic, full of half-hearted apologies and vague promises about being a better person. I ignored every single one. He had his chance to be a better person, and he blew it. There was no going back. My parents kept trying to reach out, but I ignored their calls. I didn't need their half-baked apologies or their excuses. Julia could be their problem now. In the end, everything Julia had built, the fake perfect life, the lies, the manipulation, came crashing down. And honestly, it was satisfying to watch.